NASA is hemorrhaging talent while China races toward the moon. Congress is battling the White House over billions in cuts, and commercial companies are scrambling to adapt to a radically shifting landscape. The American space industry is facing its most uncertain period in decades, and the decisions made in the next few months could determine who leads humanity's return to deep space. Welcome back to On the Radar. I'm Eric Hillsberg, product manager for aerospace at MathWorks, but the views I'm sharing on this channel are entirely my own. I've covered NASA's budget crisis extensively in recent episodes, so today I want to give you an update on how that situation has evolved, examine how the commercial sector is navigating this unprecedented uncertainty, and look at the broader institutional challenges facing American space leadership. All the sources are going to be linked below. Let's start with an update on the budget situation I've been tracking. As a reminder, the Trump administration's proposed fiscal year 2026 budget calls for slashing NASA's funding by 24%, from $24.8 billion down to $18.8 billion. The science programs face even more devastating cuts, a nearly 50% reduction from $7.3 billion to $3.9 billion. The proposed cuts would terminate over 40 current and upcoming missions, including the Chandra X-ray Observatory, the Juno mission to Jupiter, New Horizons exploring the outer solar system, and the Mars sample return mission that's been a decade in development. Based on the latest news, it seems Congress is having none of it. Both the House and Senate Appropriations Committees have passed budget bills that essentially reject these cuts wholesale. The Senate proposes $24.9 billion for NASA, actually slightly higher than current levels, while fully restoring science funding to $7.3 billion. The House isn't far behind, at $24.8 billion overall, with $6 billion for science. This sets up a fight between the executive and legislative branches. But here's the concerning part. The White House Office of Management and Budget has indicated that they may try to impound, or essentially freeze, funds that Congress appropriates if they don't get their preferred budget. Over $100 million in fiscal 2025 science funds have already reportedly been frozen. But the budget crisis is just one part of a much bigger story unfolding right now. While NASA struggles with funding uncertainty, other nations are systematically building the foundation for permanent space presence. And the race isn't just about getting there first, it's about who gets to stay. In my next video, I'll break down why NASA just fast-tracked an 100 kilowatt nuclear reactor to the moon by 2030, and why the nation that powers theirs up first could control humanity's expansion into space for the next century. The new space race isn't just heating up, it's gone nuclear. Another concern is that while this budget battle plays out, NASA is experiencing an unprecedented exodus of talent. Nearly 4,000 employees, over 20% of the entire workforce, have opted for deferred resignation, early retirement, and buyout programs. By January 2026, NASA's workforce could shrink by 21%. This means the loss of specialized, often irreplaceable knowledge, rocket scientists, mission planners, safety engineers, people with decades of experience who understand the intricate details of complex systems. Not only does this increase the risk of mission failures, it could lead to real safety risks in our upcoming moon missions. As former astronaut Garrett Reisman put it, when you have an environment of fear and people are worried about losing their job, it's not conducive to honest safety reporting. The depth of concern within NASA became clear when hundreds of current and former employees signed something called the Voyager Declaration, essentially a formal dissent document expressing alarm about policies that could compromise human safety, weaken national security, and undermine the core NASA mission. Think about that. NASA employees felt compelled to publicly dissent against their own leadership's direction, echoing the kind of internal opposition we've seen during the agency's darkest moments, like the lead up to Challenger or the budget crisis of the 1970s. Adding to the instability, NASA currently has no permanent administrator. Sean Duffy, the transportation secretary, is serving double duty as interim NASA administrator, a situation that Senator Jerry Moran recognizes is far from ideal. You can't run a $25 billion agency conducting some of the most complex engineering projects in human history as a part-time job. And this leadership vacuum comes at a critical moment, when NASA needs clear, consistent direction to compete with the other nation's systematic space program progression. While NASA deals with budget uncertainty and workforce upheaval, other space powers have been making steady progress with remarkable consistency. China in particular pursues its space goals over decades with persistence and programmatic stability. They don't experience the policy whiplash that comes with changing US administrations, and their funding doesn't face the kind of uncertainty that's currently paralyzing NASA. This programmatic stability matters enormously in space exploration, where missions take decades to plan and execute. The institutional chaos at NASA, with thousands of experienced engineers departing, comes at exactly the wrong time for maintaining the American competitive advantage. While government space programs grapple with institutional challenges, the commercial sector is adapting with characteristic agility, though not without significant challenges of its own. NASA's Commercial Lunar Payload Services Program, or CLPS, tells a story of both breakthrough successes and sobering failures. Firefly Aerospace just received their fourth CLPS award, an $176.7 million contract for the Blue Ghost 4 mission to the lunar South Pole in 2029. The reason they won is pretty apparent. Firefly is currently the only company with a fully successful CLPS landing to date. The track record for other participants has been mixed at best. Intuitive Machines has attempted 2 lunar landings, both targeting the South Polar region, and both times their landers tipped over due to issues with laser rangefinders. Astrobotic's first attempt ended with a propellant leak that prevented the lunar orbit entirely. One thing is clear, landing on the moon remains extraordinarily difficult, even with decades of accumulated knowledge and modern technology. The success rate puts enormous pressure on companies like Intuitive Machines for their upcoming IM-3 mission to Rainer Gamma. The technical challenges are forcing these companies to develop new capabilities. Intuitive Machines is now vertically integrating their lunar communication satellites to gain more control over costs and schedule, but has now delayed IM-3 until they can integrate these capabilities. Even with these low success rates, NASA is betting heavily that the commercial approach can work beyond the moon. They've introduced the Commercial Mars Payload Services Program, essentially CLPS for Mars, with $200 million allocated for the fiscal year 26 budget. Companies like Firefly are already exploring how to adapt their lunar technologies for Mars missions, with their CTO noting that somewhere between 70 and 80% of what we've proven and learned to get to the moon is directly applicable to Mars. But this isn't just about technical adaptation. It's a race against time and geopolitical competition. China has been planning their own Mars sample return mission for the late 2020s, directly competing with NASA's possibly canceled MSR program. These commercial Mars landers could provide NASA with a new plan for a Martian sample. But the 26-month launch window to Mars creates a brutal use it or lose it dynamic. Miss a window, you're not just delayed, you risk losing the industrial base and expertise by the time your next opportunity arises. The commercial sector is also grappling with the approaching end of the International Space Station era. The ISS is scheduled for deorbiting between 2030 and 2031, and NASA is shifting its strategy for commercial replacements. Instead of moving forward with firm fixed-price contracts for commercial space stations, they're continuing with Space Act agreements, essentially funded development partnerships without guaranteed purchase commitments. This strategic shift reflects the fundamental challenge of creating a commercially viable LEO economy. Companies like Axiom Space, Vast, and Blue Origin are developing space station concepts, but the business case remains unclear without substantial NASA anchor tenancy. One thing is clear, if commercial alternatives aren't ready by 2030, China could operate the only space station in orbit. But this isn't the only critical infrastructure battle in Earth orbit. The Commerce Department's Traffic Coordination System for Space, or TRACS, represents America's attempt to manage what's becoming the busiest transportation network in human history. Here's what most people don't realize. There are now over 13,000 active satellites in orbit, with companies like SpaceX launching dozens of satellites per mission. Without coordinated traffic management, the risk of catastrophic collisions grows exponentially. Each collision creates thousands of debris fragments, potentially triggering a cascade effect that could make entire orbital regions unusable for decades or longer. TRACS is moving past beta testing towards operational service in January 2026, designed to transition space traffic management from military to civilian oversight, a critical step as commercial activities accelerate. The system provides conjunction warnings, tracks debris, and most importantly, establishes data standards and protocols that will govern space traffic for decades to come. But the White House proposed cutting TRACS funding from $65 million to just $10 million, essentially eliminating the program. Their argument, let commercial providers handle space traffic management entirely. The problem is that commercial providers have their own satellites to protect, and they may not prioritize system-wide safety over competitive advantage. Both House and Senate Appropriations Committees recognize the danger, restoring funding to $50 million and $60 million respectively. As the Senate report noted, space traffic management is inherently governmental. Someone needs to be the neutral referee when commercial interests conflict. This isn't just about preventing collisions. Whoever controls space traffic management standards shapes the rules for the entire orbital economy. If America steps back from this role, other nations could fill the vacuum with their own standards and protocols. Three critical themes emerge from this complex landscape. First, institutional stability matters enormously in space exploration. While NASA's workforce worries about budget cuts and mission cancellations, other nations are methodically advancing their space capabilities with consistent, long-term investment strategies. Second, the commercial space sector is proving remarkably adaptable to institutional uncertainty. Companies are diversifying their customer base, developing dual-use technologies, and finding ways to maintain momentum even when the government priorities shift. Firefly Aerospace's success with lunar landings, combined with their plans to go public, demonstrates how commercial space can create independent revenue and funding streams that reduce dependence on government funding stability. Third, the next few months will determine American space leadership for decades. Congress must finalize NASA's budget and try to prevent the White House from circumventing their authority. So here are the critical questions. Can America maintain space leadership while dealing with institutional instability? Will Congress successfully preserve NASA's capabilities, or will partisan politics doom the space program to mediocrity? And as other nations advance their space programs with methodical consistency, can American commercial innovation compensate for government uncertainty? The stakes couldn't be higher. We're not just talking about scientific prestige. We're talking about who builds the infrastructure for humanity's next chapter beyond Earth. And that brings us to something that's about to change everything: the race to establish permanent power on the moon. Stay tuned for my deep dive into the new nuclear space race next week. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if this analysis was valuable. Thanks for watching On the Radar. I'll see you next time.